Welcome everybody, thanks for joining us. You are about to watch an interview I did with Alan Dean Foster. Alan Dean Foster is a very established science fiction writer, as well as being very active in other genres. He's written an enormous amount of fantastic books, original stories and novels, but also, and this is probably what he's best known for, he has written movie tie-in novels for pretty much every major sci-fi franchise, IP, property in the world in the last 30-40 years. And I'm not exaggerating, that includes the very first novelization of Star Wars, The Thing. In fact, he did 3 John Carpenter movies, Star Trek. The list goes on, and we found loads and loads of subjects that actually had a lot to do with video games as well, and other interests. So it's a long-ranging interview. In fact, I did 2 interviews with a few days in between as a break. Either way, I don't want to make this intro too long. Have a look, see what you think, leave some comments. If you have some questions, let us know. I might be able to follow up on them with him. He's an absolutely lovely person, very generous with his time and his answers. So without further ado, here's the first part of the interview with Alan Dean Foster. Thank you very much. I must admit, almost embarrassingly excited because so many of your novels, be they movie tie-ins or original works, have featured in my own love for reading. I was a teenager in all of the 1980s, and obviously your work goes back earlier. Was it late 60s was your first release, was it?
My first story was published in 1971 in Analog.
Oh, Analog magazine. Yeah.
Yes.
We didn't see much of Analog magazine in the Netherlands, but once in a while I found a copy in a second-hand bookstore and tried to read everything in those pages. I read Spellsinger back then, I think. Is that 70s or is that 80s, the first one?
No, that's 70s, late 70s.
Yeah. Of course, I have read a bunch of the movie tie-ins as well, but I enjoy your original work as much as the more IP-related stuff. I had a look at the list in the fiction database, and it lists 138 releases with your name on it. That's intimidating because there's so much to talk about potentially, and of course you can't cover all that in one chat, so I won't try. But I have to say, the thing that I find most interesting is that you've written in quite a few genres, as far as I can tell. Right? There's fantasy and horror, and there is action, even young adult stuff as well. But
Yes.
But it does seem to be that sci-fi is your mainstay.
Well, that's what I started writing, and that's what I've written throughout my entire career. And I would certainly, if I kicked off tomorrow, be best known as a science fiction writer.
Yeah. How do you feel about that yourself? I assume you don't see yourself in such a narrow channel, but on the other hand, there are a lot of sci-fi releases with your name on it. So you are coming back to it frequently.
Well, I always thought of myself as a traveler. That's
Right.
all I ever really wanted to do. And I've tried to see as much of this world as I possibly can. And since I'm stuck on one planet, I still like traveling, so I invent other places I'd like to go.
Right, it's fascinating. The reason why I work in video games is it allows me to create my own worlds and let other people travel there, right?
Exactly.
Now, I always thought there is overlap with writing and making games. And one of my main influences, both in games as my own humble career as a writer, is Jack Vance.
Yes. Wonderful.
He's possibly my favorite writer because he meant so much to me growing up, and of course, very prolific writer. But one thing that maybe touches upon what you are saying, he loved to travel, didn't he? And I think it shines through in his writing.
Yes. Hold on 2 seconds. I'll show you something.
Yeah.
Here you go. I have more, but
Oh, absolutely wonderful. One of my favorite of his novels, I think. Oh, and again another one. Yeah, absolutely. We had that in a big omnibus in the Netherlands, badly glued, so the pages would fall out pretty soon. I must have bought 3 copies. Just kept destroying them, reading them over and over.
Uh,
Would you say he was an influence on yourself, or is that going too far?
no, no. My three primary influences in science fiction were Eric Frank Russell, who's still my all-time favorite science fiction writer. He was John W. Campbell's favorite science fiction writer, too. A lot of people don't know that. Murray Leinster and Robert Sheckley, who I think was the greatest writer of short science fiction that the field has produced so far.
Yes, I adore Robert Sheckley. Believe it or not, I only started reading him last year,
Okay.
and I could not believe how good the short stories were.
Amazing stuff. There's a story from I think the early 50s called Watchbird, which is about armed drones and how they can get out of control.
Yes,
Amazingly prescient stuff, and a wonderful writer.
I was surprised at how much he managed to do when it comes to world building in only a few pages in these short stories.
Yes.
It's so evocative.
Yes. He did write novels, of course, but the short story was where he really shone.
So, Eric Frank Russell.
Yes.
I read you did a posthumous collaboration with him. Is that right?
That's right. A number of years ago, Tor, publisher, was doing these fix-ups where they would take a well-known science fiction story, but usually of novella length, and they would ask a well-known science fiction writer to expand it to a full-length novel. And Tom Doherty, who is the editor, asked if there was one that I would like to do, because Greg Bear had already done one or two, I think, and I think Bob Silverberg did one. And Russell did a novella called Design for Great Day, which was published in one of the 50 science fiction magazines, and then appeared as one half of an ace double, those famous ace doubles, where they changed the name to The Ultimate Invader. And I said, if I can do this one, I'd love to do it. He's my favorite writer. He's deceased, so I'll have a posthumous collaboration with my all-time favorite writer. And I got them to restore the original title, Design for Great Day. So I was very happy with how that worked out. It was not easy to do because in addition to just expanding the story, I wanted to maintain Russell's voice as much as possible. It's the same thing I do with the movie novelizations. I don't try to change the tone or the style of the original writer's work. I don't think that's my job.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask about these kinds of challenges when it comes to collaborative projects, and not just for the movie tie-ins, but I was going to talk about your work in with video game properties as well. And it's interesting because I can imagine some writers would be very eager to put their own stamp on things, while others are looking more to maintain the integrity of the source material. Do you find it hard to balance these extremes, or?
Well, with the movie novelizations, it's not a question of working with the other writer. The other writer's work is already out there, and they generally have nothing to do with the novelization, for better or worse.
Yes.
But sometimes the studio executives or the people associated with the movie do get involved. Usually I'm left alone.
Okay, that's
like,
good.
Here, yes, it is. Here's the screenplay. Here are some stills from the film. Here's some pictures of what the people wear, and go write the book, because it's just an ancillary right. It's not a major project as far as either the studio or usually the producers are concerned, so they leave you alone to do your job. But every once in a while, everybody feels that they have to put their 2 cents in. That's what happened to me on Alien 3.
Oh, yeah.
Which I did not think it was a very good script, and I'm not alone in that. But I always do the best job I can, whether I think it's a good script, a bad script, a mediocre script. And I thought I could add some things. which I always try to do in a novelization without interrupting the flow of the story or harming the original writer's work. And I sent it in, and the publisher sent back a copy of a letter that they had received from Walter Hill, one of the producers, saying that I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that, and that if I just adapted the screenplay as it was written, it would make for a better book. Now, I had already been doing this sort of work for quite a while, and instead of being snarky and writing back and saying, well, I've done this for George Lucas and John Carpenter and Ray Harryhausen, et cetera, and everybody seems happy with the work I've done. Because it's a work for hire, you're not going to get anywhere with that kind of approach. So I just went back and I had to take out a lot of what I had written, which I thought had improved the story, but I don't own any rights to the story or the screenplay or the film, so I have no pull, I have no sway. So that's what I had to do. I kept in what I thought they would leave alone anyway, as best I could. And then when they asked me, when Warner Books asked me to do the novelization of Alien 4, essentially, which was Alien Resurrection, I just said no. And I stayed away from that franchise, I thought permanently, until someone from Fox got a hold of me, and Titan Books, different publisher, and said, Ridley Scott is coming back to the Alien franchise. He's doing a film called Alien Covenant. Would you do the novelization? And I said, no. I said no 10 years ago or whatever it's been. They said, no, you don't understand. The guy from Fox was very sympathetic. He said, none of those people are involved with Alien Resurrection. The people you worked with and had to listen to on Alien 3, none of them are around anymore. Ridley Scott is back, which did intrigue me. I thought, well, send me the script and I'll see. And it was fine. I said, okay, I'll do it. And I ended up doing it and a prequel to it, an original novel that was a prequel to it, Alien Origins. And it all turned out fine. The only thing was, just to show you how Hollywood works sometimes, is when at first I was going to do a sequel to Alien Covenant. And then after I had come up with an entire treatment for the sequel, they said, no, stop. We need you to do a prequel. So I had to throw away everything I'd written, start over again. And I said, okay, I'll do a prequel. Prequels are much harder than sequels because people know what's going to happen after the prequel. They said, there's just one thing. You can't use the alien in the novel. Now, wait, you want me to write an alien novel with no aliens in it? Yeah, that's it. And at first I wanted to kind of, creatively shoot myself, I guess. And then I thought, okay, this is a challenge. I've always liked a challenge. So the book has no aliens in it.
Okay.
What I did was, yes, if you haven't seen it, was I basically went back and did a great deal involving the history of the company, Weyland-Yutani. I got to talk about Japanese corporate culture in the future, interesting things that interested me, and ended up with, I thought, a halfway decent book. Although subsequently I did, of course, get irritated emails from fans of the franchise saying, there's no aliens in this book. How can you call this an alien book, et cetera, et cetera. But on balance, more people seem to like it than not, which pleased me very much.
Well, good, because that sounds like a selling point to me, because by the time Alien Covenant came out, I thought there was a real danger of the alien having lost its impact and meaning, and I'm really not that interested in the alien itself. I'm more interested in the world building behind it.
So was I, but that's not the way the franchise went. It just became, I know a lot of people love it, but it became monster movies. And I was much more interested from the first film of who the pilot was in the alien spacecraft. And I did work with some of that in the sequel that I was going to write, the storyline, but that will never appear. So that's an never say never, but it's an unknown, undone thing. And the franchise has taken off in so many different directions, and you just can't sustain interest for forever.
No.
I mean, Conan Doyle famously tried to kill off Sherlock Holmes, and the readers wouldn't stand for it, so he had to bring them back. And writers have to deal with that sort of thing all the time.
It's interesting with Alien. I've been slowly over the years collecting the original art books by H.R. Giger, Hans Rudi Giger. And I was surprised at the sheer depth and almost Cthulhu-esque, vastness of the universe. And looking at that, almost every painting, I thought, what a shame that we only ever see alien movies about the alien. There's so much more there.
I have to tell you, before the film received a general release, we're going back, I guess, to 1979, thereabouts, they had a showing for a group of educators at the American Booksellers Association annual meeting, which that particular one was held in a grand old hotel with attached facilities in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles. So I went to it. It was upstairs in the hotel in a viewing room, and sat through about the first half of it. I'd seen the film already, and listening to all these supposedly highly educated people screaming and yelling at the appropriate points. And I walked out into the hall, and as I was walking around, there was nobody out there except this one odd-looking little man dressed all in black. And I recognized him. I'd seen pictures of him. So I wandered over, and as I mentioned, I speak a little German. He spoke no English, and introduced myself, and he introduced, and it was Giger, of course. And we had a really nice brief chat before I had to go somewhere else. If I'd thought about it, I'd have stayed longer and talked longer, but he had some place to go and I had some place to go. But I mentioned Lovecraft. I said, do you like Lovecraft? And he lit up. He lit up. He'd been very quiet until then and kind of within himself, but he just lit up. He loves Lovecraft. We know that from the title of his first art book, Necronomicon.
Yes.
And we talked about Lovecraft and, possibly making a film of Lovecraft. I said, would you be interested in doing that? He said he'd love to do that, but he hadn't been asked. He was one of the great missed opportunities in the history of film, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. Yeah.
A Lovecraft film designed by Giger would have been so scary, people would have paid to get out of the theater.
Oh.
So that was my meeting with H.R. Giger. Later, I had the art book, and I took it home, and I showed my wife. I said, I've met this gentleman. I think his art is amazing. It tends to run large, but would you be interested? Would you be okay with me buying a smaller piece of his to put out in my study? And she looked at the first 2 or 3 pages of the book, and she said, if you buy a picture from this guy and put it in your study, I'm never coming out to your study again. My study is in a separate building.
Yes.
So that was another missed opportunity. I could have probably bought an original Giger.
Oh, you didn't? Yeah.
I didn't. No. I value my wife's presence more than I do a picture's presence, no matter who the picture is by.
I think that is just and well put.
Thank you.
I'm curious now what was going to be in the sequel. That will never see the light of day.
I'll be happy. I guess I can tell you at this point, the film's been out for a very long time. They've already done other things. I don't think it's an issue. It was going to be a sequel. It was going to pick up where Michael, I'm making this very brief, of course, but they end up on a world where the engineers have been experimenting. And what you have is a whole world of animals brought from Earth who have been experimented upon. So you have the alien-esque version of every terrestrial animal you can think of.
Interesting.
Cows, dogs, birds. It's a horror planet, basically. And I thought from an art standpoint, that would have been fantastic to see. The things you could have done with the genetic manipulation and all that. It's a place you never want to go. And they have some action there and they get off. So that would have been the sequel. It would have shown us what happened before Alien Covenant and after Alien Resurrection.
Sounds great. I would buy that, and I'm not just saying that.
Right. Well, all we need is permission from Fox and about 150 mil, and don't even need Sigourney Weaver for this one.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen. So
It's unlikely, yes.
unlikely.
Thanks everyone for watching the interview. Part 2 is coming soon, full of insights and stories and even some revelations. We cover a lot of ground, including working with George Lucas, Alan's very successful original works and how he has taken inspiration from traveling in Africa, Star Trek, Call of Cthulhu, much more. Do tune in and please let us know in the comments what you think and if you would like to see more interviews like this. See you next time!